Hey, Cards, Ryan Breckbill here from the Center for Career and Professional Development, here with another edition of Between Two Cards. I am honored today to be joined by the Dean Bob Gaddy, aka Big Daddy Gaddy. Welcome, Bob. So thrilled that you're here to join us today.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Thanks for having me. And you know, as a graduate of South Carolina, one of the Southern traditions is to have a little tea before we begin a meeting. So I know you're a sweet tea guy.
Yep. Yes, sir. Yes, Cheers. Sir. Cheers. Well, Bob, again, we just thank you for being here. Many people may not know that you are an honorary alum of Otterbein. What year was that you received that degree?
Gosh, I should have looked at that. I think around 96 or no, okay. 2002. 2002.
Okay. 2002. Well, congratulations, honorary alum, Dean Bob Gaddy. So we're just going to get right to it. Why don't you just start off by giving us an overview about you, a little bit about your career at Otterbein, and then I think a lot of people would want to know what you've been up to over the past 9 or 10 months in retirement.
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, I came to Otterbein in 1848. Philip Otterbein reached out to me about a potential job. No. I started Otterbein as a residence hall director, and I was in Davis Hall as a hall director and a Greek advisor. And the interesting thing about that position is that I'd never lived in a residence hall, even when I was in college. I either lived in fraternity houses, Greek housing, or I lived in apartments. And I remember when I interviewed with Dean Van, I said, I've never lived in a residence halls. And her response to me is, but you have the skill set. And so that sold me on coming to Otterbein when they looked at me as a whole person and not as an individual. But I did that for 2 years. And then following that, I was campus center director for 2 years. And in that position, I was reporting to 2 separate vice presidents. And as you know, when you're young in your career, you always check with some of your mentors from grad school. And everybody advised me against taking a job where you have 2 bosses. But it was a great experience for me there, and I really learned the business side of it because I worked with the vice president for business affairs on the operation of the campus center, and then the vice president for student affairs on the student activities and the programming. And then after that, I was promoted to dean of students, and I was in that role for about 9 years. And as I progressed in that role, I took on additional responsibilities. And most of them were not without, they didn't come with additional salary. I just took on the responsibility. So I got a great breadth and depth of what it was to be a student affairs professional. And then finally, I became vice president of student affairs, and I was in that role for 27 years. And I retired last July. And, we were planning to do a lot more traveling. And in fact, we were traveling in South Carolina when this reached a head. And we came back, cut our trip short because we were heading to Florida when Governor DeWine shut down or did the stay-at-home order. And so we got back in on a Monday, and then Tuesday was the stay-at-home order. So, we've just been at home. Yep. The yard looks great. It's never looked any better. The garden's been tilled, but it's too cold to plant, but it's been tilled, ready to be planted. So we're doing well.
Awesome.
Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Truly just a remarkable career at Otterbein. And thank you for all of those years of service and the ways that you continue to serve the institution even now. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
What is it about an Otterbein education, both inside and outside of the classroom, that you think really makes a difference in the lives of our students?
Yeah. A lot of people would separate the two. They talk about what they learned in the classroom from very talented professors, and then they would talk about, what they learned outside. I like to blend the two, and I like to say that they're seamless. And, I've often said to staff, and you've heard this, that one of the important things that we can do is help the student think about what they learn in the classroom outside the classroom. So, for example, you have a student who's a communication major, or they take a communication class. Then they can practice and hone in those skills as an orientation leader or as an organizational leader or in other different roles and things like that. students who take an INST class, they can have a better grasp of what social justice is and how to work with people from different backgrounds. And as we all know, when they enter the workforce, they're going to work with a more diverse population, a very diverse population. And so they need to have that skill set. And that gives them a one up on anybody else that's looking at those opportunities. I often think too, like, what you learn even living in a residence halls, that you learn skills like conflict resolution, mediation skills, how to be assertive. You learn a lot of skills in that environment that that you may learn in a classroom, in a psychology class, but you're able to put that to practice outside the classroom.
Awesome. Thank you. What do you think it means to be an Otterbein Cardinal?
What it means to be an Otterbein Cardinal? It means we care. That's what an Otterbein Cardinal is. We care. I have a hat on. You saw that. And not because I haven't had a haircut like you. I don't have Becca here. It's been months since I had a haircut. But also wearing this hat because it's one of my favorites. It was given to me by Dr. Kathy Ryan. And the logo, if you can see it, is a lacrosse player. And this was given out or sold as a fundraiser for the lacrosse program for mental health education and suicide prevention. And it reminds me that, there are plenty of people at Otterbein that, if you're feeling lonely or you need some help or you want to talk to somebody, that you can reach out to, whether it's faculty or staff or the counseling center and the marvelous student affairs staff. Even though I know, like you're busy all day with meetings, you'll still find time to talk with students. So I think it's that caring attitude that makes Otterbein.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there, over your many years of service, are there people that stand out that made a difference to you, either or in your personal and or professional life?
Good question. Obviously my parents, they made a big difference, and they were great role models. My dad was one that said, was one of very few words, be led by example. And even sometimes putting me in really, really awkward situations, but maybe either help me learn or grow or teach me a lesson. And then certainly at Otterbein, I can think of a lot of people. I had the privilege of working with Dean Van Sant, who definitely was a role model and somebody that influenced the way I approached my work every day. And then I worked with 4 wonderful presidents, Tom Kerr, Brent DeVore, Kathy Crandall, and now President John, as he's referred to. I really enjoyed working with each one of those. So they all had an influence on my life.
Outstanding. Thank you.
I better say, and Jackie, my wife.
Absolutely. So last question before we get to the final portion of this conversation, but what piece of advice would you share with current students?
Oh, man, let me have a sip of tea because I have 41 years of advice. I could give you one for each year, but I'll stick to one and be sensitive to your time.
You're allowed to have more than one, Bob. You earned it.
I think one of the key lessons that I would, or advice that I would pass along, and I learned this in grad school, because when I was in grad school, we took a lot of counseling classes. And my advice is that we need to be kind to ourselves and really step back and think about how we're talking to ourselves. And I know in working with students over the years, we have a tendency to be harsher and more critical of ourselves than we would anybody else. And we tend to be sometimes pretty unkind and when we talk to ourselves. I'll give you an example. When I was applying after grad school, when I was applying for my first professional job, it was at a time where the unemployment was in double digits. Interest rates were 17, 18%. So, the market was tough. And, I put out probably 90 resumes looking for a job. And I probably had a half dozen interviews. And, it was real easy for me to say to myself, maybe this isn't a field for you, or maybe you're not good enough to do this work. But I checked myself at the door and said, no, don't. Because if one of my peers was having trouble, I'd say, oh, you're good. Somebody's going to find you and they're going to know what a gem you are. So I talked to myself a little better, and I ended up getting one job offer, and that was at Otterbein. But if I would have let that negativity seep in, I would never have had a career of 41 years at a wonderful school. So that would be my one most important piece of advice.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All right, here we go. The Otterbein edition of This or That. Are you ready, Dean Gaddy?
I am ready.
All right, here we go. Cardinal or otter?
Oh, no question. Cardinal.
Yes, sir.
I think it would be hard to dress up as an otter and run around the football field or the basketball court. So no, Cardinal it is.
Got it. Roost or bean?
Bean.
Very
Bean.
good.
And especially when Melissa and those wonderful ladies are working in there, they do such a wonderful job.
They are awesome. They are awesome. Late night breakfast or spaghetti dinner at the Church of the Master?
No question. Late night breakfast with plenty of bacon.
So we got to talk. I don't know if everyone knows about this, and I feel like we need to unpack this a little bit. Tell us about late night breakfast and you and bacon.
They asked faculty and staff to serve late night breakfast. It was always one of the things I enjoyed doing. And I would always pick the early shift because from 10 to 11, because it would take me a half hour to get home, and then I'd turn around and get up and come back at 5 o'clock, 5:30. So I took the early shift, and the sous chefs would always run it for Bon Appetit. And they always insisted that you only give 2 slivers of bacon. And, I couldn't do that. And I would get reprimanded. I would get written up. I would get turned into the general manager. But I always gave as much as the student wanted. And I liked bacon, and I know they like bacon.
That's right.
It's
Yeah.
candied meat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I've been yelled at for 2.5 pieces of bacon, so I know where you're coming from. But no, late night breakfast legend right there. So good stuff. All right, 2 more. Java Central or Heavenly Cup Espresso Air?
Java Central.
And finally, for the donut run, white milk or chocolate milk?
Chocolate milk.
Gotcha.
Definitely chocolate milk.
Right on. Now, I have, just for you, Bob, I have a bonus this or that. So I happen to have 2 T-shirts with your face on them. So I'm not gonna ask you to choose, but we've got this T-shirt, which was given out at your retirement, The Legend, 1978 to 2019. There's that beauty. And then that is one of my all-time favorite T-shirts. But I have to say that this one is my number 1 all-time favorite T-shirt. The Bob Fathers. This was our kickball T-shirt, our uniform for several years when we were playing kickball. So all of us student affairs staff had the Bob Fathers. So to have your face on 2 T-shirts, that's like double platinum right there. So you got a favorite in one of those?
Yeah, I love the Bob Fathers. And I have to tell you a story about the Legend T-shirt because, and I think I mentioned this at my retirement when they were handing them out, but a student had one earlier, and she wore it at home, and she went over to her grandmother, and her grandmother said, "Who's that on your T-shirt?" And she said, "Well, that's our Dean of Students, Dean Gaddy." And the grandmother looked at the T-shirt and said, "Well, he died young."
Oh.
Because it has
78
gotcha,
the year, yeah.
2019, yeah. She said he was young when he passed away.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So still alive. I'm still doing fine.
And we're glad. We are glad. Well, Bob, Dean Gaddy, Big Daddy Gaddy, thank you so very much for sharing your insight and perspective on this edition of Between Two Cards. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Ryan. You're doing some great work under these circumstances. I've been impressed with everything everyone's been doing. So keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.